On Christmas Eve, I found a card under the tree. It was my mother's handwriting, and she's been dead for 10 years. If you are reading this, it said. The truth must come out. Before I could read more, my stepmother snatched it, slapped me hard across the face, and hissed, "Don't dig up ghosts." I thought it was just another rough holiday, but that card unlocked an inheritance theft, legal manipulation, and a decade of lies she'd built around my father. My name is Cassidy Rowan. At 29 years old, I'm a content manager for a moderately successful, perpetually stressed startup in Portland called Northwind Social Labs. It's a life I built from scratch, funded by lukewarm coffee and late nights, surrounded by the damp, green quiet of the Pacific Northwest. It's my life, not theirs, but twice a year. I fly home to Reno, back to the dry air and the ringing slot machines, and back to the house that stopped feeling like mine the day my mother died and Veronica Hale moved in. My mother, Elaine, died in a car accident 10 years ago. 6 months later, my father, Thomas Rowan, married Veronica, and just like that, the colors in our house changed from warm yellows and blues to shades of beige and sterile gray. The furniture became angular and uncomfortable. The photographs of Elaine vanished, one by one, until the only trace of her was in the set of my jaw and the way I tilted my head when I was thinking. This Christmas Eve was no different. I'd caught the morning flight from PDX, the cabin smelling of stale air and spilled Starbucks, and landed in the garish, blinking lights of the Reno airport. The drive to my father's house was quiet. He asked about my job in that vague way that meant he wasn't really listening, his eyes constantly flicking to the phone in the center console, waiting for it to light up. The house was, as always, immaculate. Veronica's version of Christmas was less a celebration and more a hostile takeover of seasonal decor. The tree was enormous, a perfect, symmetrical fir that looked like it had been sculpted rather than grown. Every ornament was a flawless, shatterproof silver or white globe, spaced with geometric precision. It was beautiful, in the way a magazine spread is beautiful, cold, untouchable, and bearing no resemblance to any Christmas I remembered. The party was sparse, a few neighbors I didn't recognize, 2 of Veronica's friends from her charity board, and a distant cousin who looked as uncomfortable as I felt. The air was thick with the scent of pine, but it was fighting a losing battle against Veronica's perfume, an expensive, heavy gardenia scent that seemed to coat every surface. She was gliding through the living room, all crimson silk and tight smiles, her eyes missing nothing. My father had already retreated to the patio, his phone pressed to his ear, his back to the glass door. He was avoiding the festivities. He was avoiding me. I felt the familiar holiday exhaustion settle over me, the dull ache of performing a role I'd never auditioned for. I grabbed a glass of champagne I didn't want and drifted toward the tree, pretending to admire the perfect, soulless ornaments. My gaze dropped to the base, to the pristine white velvet skirt where perfectly wrapped boxes were arranged like a fortress. And then I saw it. It wasn't a present. It was small, wedged deep between the heavy painted gold base of the tree stand and the thick trunk. A plain white envelope, thin as a whisper. It was old. The paper had yellowed, and the corner was sealed not with glue, but with a strip of brittle, faded blue electrical tape. My heart didn't just beat. It slammed against my ribs. I knew that tape. My mother used it for everything. Labeling wires, fixing leaky pipes, holding together the spines of my favorite books. My hand was shaking as I knelt, pushing aside the stiff velvet skirt. The smell of dried pine needles and dust hit me. I pulled the envelope free. It was light, almost empty. My name was on the front, written in her hand. It wasn't possible. Elaine had been gone for a decade, but I knew that handwriting better than my own. The familiar, elegant loops, the way the sea in Cassidy curled back on itself like a wave. A cold, sharp dread, heavier than grief, moved straight down my spine. This was real. This was here. In the corner, in that same looping script, were 5 words. Only open when you are alone. I clutched the envelope to my chest, A quick scan of the room. Veronica was across the way, handing a drink to the neighbor, but her eyes, those sharp, assessing eyes, were on me. She hadn't seen what I found. Not yet. But she sensed the shift in my posture. She sensed the disturbance in her perfect room. My father was still outside, pacing, his voice a low, anxious murmur against the glass. Alone. I needed to be alone. I stood up, trying to look casual, slipping the thin envelope into the pocket of my jeans. I turned and walked toward the kitchen, the brightest, most public place I could think of as a misdirection before I bolted upstairs to the bathroom. I just needed 1 minute. I didn't make it 2 steps. "Cassidy." Veronica's voice cut through the low hum of conversation. She was fast. I hadn't even seen her move. But suddenly she was right in front of me, blocking my path to the kitchen. Her smile was a thin, red gash, bright and warning. "What did you find?" she asked. It wasn't a question. It was a demand. "Nothing," I said, my voice too high. "Just admiring the tree." "Your pocket, Cassidy. What is in your pocket?" "It's nothing, Veronica. Just an old—" She didn't wait for the lie. She lunged, her hand, nails painted a perfect, glossy crimson, clamped around my wrist like a steel trap. Her fingers dug into the bone. "Give it to me," she hissed, her face inches from mine. The gardenia scent was suffocating. "No, get off me!" I tried to pull away, but she was surprisingly strong. She yanked my arm, using her other hand to claw at my jeans pocket. "It's mine!" I shouted, the words tearing out of me. The cheap, old paper of the envelope couldn't stand the assault. It ripped. I heard it tear. A sound like a dry leaf crunching. I felt something small and cold fall from the paper and hit my palm, as Veronica ripped the larger half of the envelope free from my grasp. I looked down. In my hand, I held a torn scrap of the envelope, and resting in my palm, glinting under the warm Christmas lights, was a small, thin metal key, like a key for a post office box or a diary. I looked at the scrap of paper. My mother's handwriting, frantic now, was visible just below the tear. Veronica was staring at the larger piece of paper in her hand, her face pale, her eyes wide with a pure, unfiltered panic. Then she looked at me, at the key in my hand. "You," she whispered, her voice trembling with rage. "You little ghoul! Don't you dare dig up ghosts!" And then she slapped me. It wasn't a tap. It was a full, open-palmed strike, thrown with all her weight. The sound was sharp, a crack that silenced the entire room. The music, the chatter, the clinking of glasses, it all vanished. My head snapped to the side. A bright, blinding white light exploded behind my eyes, and my cheek instantly felt both numb and on fire. The taste of copper filled my mouth. I am 29 years old. I have a career, an apartment, a retirement plan, and my stepmother had just hit me in front of a room full of people. I slowly turned my head back. Veronica was breathing hard, her chest heaving, her crimson silk dress suddenly looking garish. Her hand was still raised slightly, poised for another strike. The guests were frozen. The neighbor's wineglass was halfway to her mouth. The distant cousin looked at the floor, at the ceiling, anywhere but at me. I looked past Veronica, searching for my father. He was standing in the doorway from the patio now, his phone still in his hand, his face a mask of bewildered horror. He looked at me, at my reddening cheek, at his wife. "Veronica," he said, his voice weak, a pathetic bleat. "That's enough. It's Christmas." He didn't defend me. He didn't ask if I was okay. He didn't reprimand her. He just asked for a ceasefire. The betrayal was a physical blow, colder and harder than the slap. It was a sudden, agonizing pressure in my chest, as if my ribs were collapsing inward. I stared at my father, this man who had taught me to ride a bike and checked for monsters under my bed. He looked away. "You're right, Thomas," Veronica said, her voice shaking but already regaining its composure. She smoothed down her dress, her eyes narrowing at me with pure venom. "It's Christmas, and she is ruining it." She turned and walked away, clutching the stolen piece of my mother's letter. I stood there for a long moment, the silence of the room roaring in my ears. The fire in my cheek was spreading down my neck. I could feel the imprint of her fingers. I closed my fist, the sharp edges of the tiny key digging into my palm. I refused to cry. Not here, not in her house. I looked down at the scrap of paper still clutched in my other hand. My vision was blurry, but I could make out the words my mother had written, the last words before the paper tore. "Safe deposit box number 1432, Sunrise Federal." The ringing in my ears was louder than the frozen silence of the living room. My cheek throbbed, a hot, spreading stain of humiliation. But as I stood there, fist clenched around the tiny metal key, I realized the shock wasn't the violence itself. The shock was that it had finally happened on the outside. For 10 years, I had been the family's designated pawn. Ever since Veronica married my father, my position in the household, and by extension, the wider family, had been subtly, expertly redefined. I was no longer the daughter of the house. I was the utility player, the permanent backstage crew, the unpaid help. It started small, at holidays. I was always the one defaulted to watch the younger cousins. "Cassidy, you're so good with them," Veronica would coo, already turning away to refresh a guest's drink, leaving me to mediate a screeching dispute over a video game controller while the adults laughed in the next room. I was 23 when she started this, then 25, then 27. The role never changed. Family birthdays, especially for her side of the family, were my masterclass in servitude. I would arrive, same as any guest, and within 10 minutes find myself in the kitchen, shucking oysters, arranging cheese boards, or desperately trying to find a platter that matched Veronica's rigid aesthetic. She would drift in, wearing silk, inspect my work, and say, "The brie needs more figs, Cassidy," before gliding back out to the party, a perfect hostess receiving compliments on her effortless entertaining. I spent my cousin Timmy's entire 10th birthday party plunging a clogged garbage disposal while the sounds of the magician she'd hired filtered in from the lawn. The worst, the absolute lowest point, came last New Year's Eve. I was living in Portland, fully independent, and had planned to spend the night with my own friends. Then my father called. His voice was laced with that specific, weak melancholy he'd perfected. "It just won't be the same without you. Cass, Veronica is making that pot roast you like." Like a fool, I fell for it. I canceled my plans, packed an overnight bag, and drove the 7 hours south. Through the dark, icy mountain passes, I hit Reno just after 9 in the evening, exhausted, hungry, and full of a stupid, stubborn hope that this time I would just get to be a guest. Veronica met me at the door. She didn't hug me. She didn't even take my coat. "Oh, perfect. You're here," she said, her eyes flicking over my shoulder to the driveway. "I have a small crisis. Come with me." She led me not to the kitchen, but to the garage. The air was frigid, smelling of gasoline and old fertilizer. In the corner, a large beige plastic tarp was spread on the floor. "I was trying to touch up the paint on an old vase," she said, gesturing vaguely, "and it spilled, just a bit, on the floor." It was not a bit. It was a thick, ugly puddle of beige enamel paint slowly hardening on the concrete floor. "I need you to handle this before it sets permanently," she said, tapping her painted nails against her crossed arms. "The scraper is on the workbench. Don't use the good towels. There are rags under the sink." I just stared at her. "Now, Veronica, I just drove 7 hours. The party is fine. This," she said, pointing at the spill, "is an ugly, difficult stain. It requires focus. You're young. You can handle it." She turned, and the door to the house clicked shut, leaving me in the freezing dark with a paint scraper. I spent the countdown to midnight on my hands and knees, scrubbing at hardened paint, the fumes making my eyes water. I could hear the faint sounds of laughter and the pop of a champagne cork through the wall. When I finally came inside, smelling of turpentine, my hands raw. The party was over. Veronica was yawning. "Oh, good," she said, not looking up from her phone. "You're done." When I confronted my father the next morning, he just sighed and rubbed his temples. "You're young, Cassidy. A little hard work builds character. You're learning." That was his excuse for everything. It was the vague, flimsy armor he wore to avoid ever having to confront his wife. He framed my servitude as some kind of rigorous, old-fashioned character training. Veronica's justification was more direct. "This house runs on order," she would say, usually while pointing out a coaster I'd failed to use, but order was just her word for hierarchy. And in her hierarchy, I was permanently at the bottom. Any attempt I made to establish a boundary, to say no, was met with the same dismissive, pitying smile. "Oh, Cassidy, don't be so sensitive. It's just family." My friends in Portland, the ones who had become my real family, couldn't understand it. "Why do you even go?" my best friend, Maya, would ask after every disastrous holiday debrief. "Just stay here. They're toxic. He's a coward and she's a monster." She was right, but she hadn't known the house before. She hadn't known my mother. I kept coming back because this house, underneath Veronica's cold, sterile layers of gray and beige, was the last place that held any tangible memory of Elaine. My mother was the one who had taught me to write. She was all warmth and chaotic energy, smelling of library books and dark roast coffee. She left handwritten notes in my lunchbox, on my bathroom mirror, tucked into my shoes. Her cards, for birthdays and holidays, were events, full of intricate drawings and private jokes. After the funeral, the house went quiet. Then Veronica arrived, and the house didn't just change, it was systematically erased. The first to go were the photographs. They were dated, Veronica said. They were replaced with abstract art. Then the bright, worn Persian rugs Elaine had loved were swapped for monochrome, industrial weave carpets. The sprawling, messy herb garden my mother had spent a decade cultivating was paved over for a patio extension. The custom bookshelf my mother had built with her own hands in the study, the one with the slightly crooked top shelf, was dismantled and replaced with a wall of sterile, white, built-in cabinets. I watched it happen, piece by piece, until the woman who had filled every corner of this home was reduced to nothing but a rumor. There was another rumor, too, one I'd only half believed until tonight. I was 20, maybe 21, just after Veronica had moved in, and I overheard my mother's sister, Marla, arguing with my father in the kitchen. Elaine was specific. "Thomas," she'd whispered furiously, "there was a fund, a separate account for Cass's graduate school." I never saw Marla in the house again after that day. When I finally got the courage to ask my father about it, he paled and mumbled something about complicated estates and everything being tied together. When I dared to ask Veronica, she actually laughed, a short, sharp, barking sound. "Oh, darling," she'd said, patting my hand. "Your mother was a lovely woman, but her finances were a complete mess. We were lucky to salvage the house. Be grateful for what you have." And I had been quiet. I had been sensitive. I had been the dutiful, character-building pawn. I had scrubbed the garage floor at midnight. I had taken the insults and the erasure, all while paying my own way through college and building a life she couldn't touch. I had absorbed a decade of small, corrosive humiliations. They were death by 1,000 paper cuts. But standing there in the living room, my cheeks screaming, the tiny key digging a crescent moon into my palm, I knew it was over. That slap wasn't a paper cut. It was a knife. The note wasn't a ghost. It was evidence. My mother, 10 years gone, hadn't just left me a card. She had left me an instruction manual, and the feeling rising in my chest, colder and harder than the key, wasn't grief. It was the sudden, clarifying snap of my own self-defense. I didn't bother to wipe the stinging tears from my eyes. I walked, head high, right past my father's useless, averted gaze and the frozen, curious stares of the remaining guests. I didn't run. I walked straight up the stairs to the guest bathroom, the only room in the house Veronica hadn't bothered to renovate. The one with the avocado green sink my mother had always jokingly called her swamp. I locked the door. The bolt sliding home was the loudest, most satisfying sound I'd ever heard. For a moment, I just stood there, my back pressed against the wood, breathing. The adrenaline was making me shake so hard I could barely feel my feet. My cheek was a hot, tight mask. Then, I opened my hand. The key was small, brass, and stamped with a number. The scrap of paper was crumpled from my fist. I smoothed it out on the cold, green marble counter. My mother's handwriting. Under the harsh fluorescent light, I could see it clearly. It wasn't just a note. It was a map. A small, hand-drawn grid of streets from a part of downtown Reno I hadn't visited in years. An X was marked over a small, square building. Beside it, in her familiar, looping script, were the words, SF, 1432. And below that, the two words I'd read before, Sunrise Federal. The name echoed in my head, unlocking a memory, not a big, impersonal bank like the ones Veronica used. Sunrise Federal was the small, brick-and-mortar credit union my mom had used for her freelance writing business. The one where the tellers knew her name. The one where I'd sit in a vinyl chair, eating a free lollipop, while she signed papers. I hadn't thought about it in a decade. I'd assumed it had gone out of business. My phone was in my pocket. My fingers, clumsy and trembling, unlocked it. I typed, Sunrise Federal, Reno. My heart leaped. It was still there. One branch, the same branch, on that exact downtown street from the map. I clicked on the link, holiday hours, closed Christmas Day, of course. But tomorrow, December 26th, they were open, limited hours, 9 a.m. to noon, just 3 hours. A sudden violent pounding on the door made me jump, the lock rattling in its frame. Cassidy, open this door! Veronica's voice. It wasn't the smooth, controlled hostess voice anymore. This was a low, guttural snarl, an animalistic rage I'd never heard from her. I know you're in there. Give me that key. You have absolutely no idea what you are meddling with. More pounding, hard enough to shake the doorframe. This is not your concern. Cassidy, this is private family business. You are destroying this holiday. Then, a second voice, weaker, more pathetic. My father. Cass, come on, please. Just give the key to Veronica. We'll talk about this later. Don't make things any worse than they are. Later. The word hit me like a second slap. Later was his shield, the empty promise he'd used to placate me for 10 years. Later was the void where his spine should have been. Later meant never. The shaking in my hands stopped. A cold, sharp calm, as pure as ice, settled over me. This wasn't just a family dispute. This was a hunt, and my mother had just given me the map. I picked up the scrap of paper and the small brass key. I laid them on the green counter, held my phone steady over them, and took a picture. The flash was blindingly bright. I watched the image upload to my secure cloud drive, safe from this house, safe from her. I slid the key deep into the small, hidden zipper compartment inside my wallet. I folded the scrap of paper and slid it into my boot, beneath my sock, where the stiff leather pressed it against my ankle. Then I flushed the toilet, for effect. I turned on the cold water and splashed it on my face, the sting on my cheek turning into a dull, angry throb. I looked in the mirror. My eyes were red. My cheek was already swelling, but the person looking back at me was not the girl who had arrived this morning, hoping for pot roast. This was someone else. I unlocked the door and pulled it open. They were both standing there, a portrait of dysfunction. Veronica, her face blotchy red with fury, her crimson dress looking cheap and garish. My father, standing a few feet behind her, looking miserable. His eyes fixed on the carpet. He couldn't even look at me. Well? Veronica demanded, her hand outstretched, palm up, a command. I kept my voice perfectly flat. I don't have anything. Don't lie to me, Cassidy. I'm not. It was just a piece of paper. It tore to bits. I flushed it. Her eyes narrowed, searching my face for a lie. And the key? The key that fell out? What key? I asked, widening my eyes in mock innocence. I didn't see a key. It was just an old, empty envelope. I pushed past them. I felt my shoulder brush my father's arm as I moved by. He flinched, as if I had burned him. The living room was a graveyard. The party was over. The last of the guests were making quiet. Awkward escapes, murmuring, "Lovely time, Veronica," and "We really must be going," all while stealing furtive glances at my face. I didn't care. I walked to the hall closet and grabbed my coat and my purse. I was leaving. I wasn't staying another second in this house. As I was shrugging on my coat, a frail, paper-skinned hand touched my arm. I turned. It was Marla, my mother's great-aunt. She was ancient, draped in a beaded cardigan that smelled of sherry and old lace. I hadn't seen her in years, not since I'd overheard her arguing with my father in the kitchen about my mother's money. Veronica had systematically cut off all of my mother's side of the family. "Be careful, child," she whispered. Her eyes, magnified by thick glasses, were wide and terrified. "Marla," I breathed, turning my body to shield our conversation from the front door, where Veronica was now bidding a false, cheerful goodbye to the neighbors. "Your mother." Marla's voice was a dry rasp. "Before she died, after she got sick, she was afraid." "Afraid?" My stomach clenched. "Afraid of what?" "She was afraid something would disappear," Marla whispered, her eyes darting nervously toward Veronica. "She said, 'They're trying to erase me. Marla, they'll try to erase what I've left for Cass.'" "What?" I gripped her thin arm. "What did she leave?" "Marla, you have to tell me." She shook her head, pulling her arm free. Pure, animal fear was in her eyes. "She made me promise not to speak of it. I can't." She saw Veronica turn, her gaze sweeping the room, and Marla visibly shrank. "Just Sunrise Federal," she whispered. So quiet I almost missed it. "She always trusted them," she said. "Not the big ones. Marla. They have no memory." Marla scuttled away, grabbing her own purse, and fled out the front door without another word. Sunrise Federal. It was confirmation. My mother hadn't been paranoid. She'd been prescient. I walked out the front door into the freezing Reno night. The air was sharp and clean, a welcome shock after the suffocating perfume and tension of the house. I was halfway to my rental car, my keys in my hand, when a figure stepped out from the deep shadows beside the garage. I gasped and recoiled, my hand flying to my throat. "Miss Cassidy?" My heart hammered. "Hector?" It was Hector. He had been my mother's gardener. He'd been tending the roses and the lawn at this house for more than 20 years. The only other living thing, besides me, that predated Veronica. He was an old man now, his back bent from decades of work, but his eyes were as clear as I remembered. "I am sorry. I did not mean to frighten you," he said. He was holding a small brown paper lunch sack, the top rolled down tightly. "I was waiting. I saw what happened. Through the window." He stepped forward and pushed the bag into my hands. It was surprisingly heavy, solid. "What is this?" "Miss Elaine," he said, his voice low and gravelly, his gaze sweeping the driveway to make sure we were alone. "A long time ago, right after she got sick, but before the accident, she gave this to me." He clutched his cap in his hands. She said, "Hector, if there is ever a day Veronica raises her hand to my daughter, or if Cass looks like she is finally seeing, you give this to her." She said I would know the day. A cold dread washed over me, displacing the adrenaline. If Veronica raises her hand, my mother had known this was possible. She had anticipated this exact moment, this exact breaking point. She said that? My voice was barely a whisper. She said, "My Cass is strong, but she is kind. People will try to use her kindness as a weakness. This is for when she is ready to be strong." He nodded at the bag in my hands. "I have held this for 10 years. I think today is the day." He touched the brim of his cap. "Good night, Miss Cassidy, and be very careful, that one." He jerked his head toward the house. She watches everything. Hector melted back into the shadows, disappearing as silently as he had arrived. I scrambled into my rental car and jammed the locks down. My heart was pounding so hard, I thought it might break through my ribs. I turned on the dim, yellow dome light. My hands were shaking again. I unrolled the top of the brown paper bag. Inside, there were two things. The first was a small, white plastic cassette, a mini DV tape, the kind used in the handheld camcorders from the early 2000s. The second was a folded piece of paper. I unfolded it. It was an official bank document, a flimsy carbon copy, pale pink. It was a receipt for a 10-year safe deposit box rental fee. From Sunrise Federal. It was dated just 3 weeks before her accident. The receipt was marked paid in full. The 10-year lease, I realized with a jolt, was expiring. Right now, this month. The key, the map, the tape, the receipt. This wasn't a nostalgic memory. This was a dead man's switch, a go bag. My mother hadn't just left me a card. She had left me a complete, meticulously organized arsenal. I put the car in gear, my hands suddenly steady on the wheel. I wasn't going to my hotel. I was going to find a 24-hour electronics store, if one even still existed, and pray they had something that could play a mini DV tape. And then, at 9 a.m. tomorrow, I was going to be the first person in line at Sunrise Federal. I pulled away from the curb, the perfect, sterile Christmas lights of my father's house blurring in the rearview mirror. The time for being quiet was over. Tomorrow, I was going to break the bank. I found a nondescript hotel off the highway, a beige box smelling of industrial disinfectant and the faint, ghostly memory of cigarette smoke. It was the perfect antidote to Veronica's suffocating, pine-scented prison. I double-bolted the door, dropped my bag, and laid my treasures on the particle-board desk under the weak yellow lamp. The brass key, the pink carbon copy receipt for a 10-year lease at Sunrise Federal, the small white mini DV tape. My artifacts of a life I'd been told was a mess. I looked at the tape, a locked box. It was Christmas night, nearly 11. I grabbed my car keys and drove through the empty, glittering streets of Reno, past casinos pumping cheerful, soulless carols into the empty air. I tried a 24-hour Walmart, closed. I tried a superstore that claimed to be open 365 days a year. A paper sign taped to the glass said, "Closed for Christmas. See you tomorrow at 8. There was nowhere to find a mini DV player, not tonight. I drove back to the hotel, the frustration a bitter, metallic taste in my mouth. I was sitting on the edge of the stiff, polyester comforter, the key and the receipt in my hand, the useless tape on the desk, when my phone buzzed on the nightstand. It wasn't a text, it was a notification. My blood, which had been simmering with adrenaline, turned to ice. It was a Facebook notification. Veronica Hale tagged you in a post. I opened the app. My feed was already lit up. She hadn't just tagged me. She'd made the post public. Her profile picture, a professionally shot photo of her and my father smiling at a charity gala, beamed above the text. "It is with the heaviest heart I write this on Christmas night," she began. "As many of you who were here tonight witnessed, we had a very difficult and painful family incident. My stepdaughter, Cassidy, who we love dearly, is struggling profoundly with the grief of her mother's passing, even after 10 years. This grief has unfortunately manifested as acute instability and some deeply hurtful, confused accusations against our family. Based on things she believes she's found, we are trying to get her the help she needs. Please keep our family in your prayers as we navigate this painful private matter." My breath hitched. Instability, confused accusations, needs help. It was the classic, brutal, effective, "she's crazy" defense. She was preemptively discrediting me before I even knew what I was fighting. She was painting me as a hysterical, grieving girl, and her as the long-suffering, compassionate matriarch. And then I looked at the comments. They were flooding in, a waterfall of support for her. A woman from her church group wrote, "Veronica, you are a saint. We saw how you welcomed her. Some people are just ungrateful." A man I vaguely recognized as one of my father's business partners. So sorry you have to deal with this, V. Disgusting behavior from an adult, especially on Christmas. Then, the first knife twist. I heard she was demanding money. It's always about the money, isn't it? Despicable. Digging up poor Elaine's memory for a paycheck. My stomach turned. In less than 10 minutes, I had been tried and convicted in the court of her social media. I was unstable, ungrateful, and money-grubbing. I scrolled down, my thumb numb, past the dozens of, "We're praying for you, Veronica, and you are a pillar of strength." And then I saw it. It wasn't a comment. It was just an icon, a small, blue thumbs up, lost in the sea of support. Liked by Thomas Rowan. The air left my lungs in a painful rush. This was worse than the slap. This was worse than his weak, pathetic, "That's enough," in the living room. The slap was Veronica's spontaneous rage. This was a calculated, public endorsement of the lie. He had read her words, instability, needs help, confused. And he clicked like. He co-signed my character assassination. He, my father, had just told the entire world that his daughter was mentally unwell. The shaking returned, but it wasn't fear this time. It was a cold, methodical rage that sharpened my vision. I run digital content for a living. I knew exactly what to do. I didn't reply. I didn't defend myself. I didn't engage. I took a screenshot. Click. I saved the post. I scrolled down and took a screenshot of the first wave of comments. Click. I scrolled again, capturing the money-grubbing accusation. Click. And then I took a separate, tight screenshot of her post, showing only one reaction, the blue thumb, liked by Thomas Rowan. I saved them all. I uploaded them to the same secure cloud drive where I'd saved the picture of the map and the key. Click, screenshot, save. The rhythm of modern warfare. My phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't a public notification. It was a private message, a Facebook DM from Veronica. The passive-aggressive, praying for you mask was gone. This was pure steel. "You have until 9 a.m. tomorrow. You will bring me the key, the real one, and whatever else that old man gave you. You will come to the house, and you will give them to me. You will delete the photos you took. This ends now. If you go to that bank, I promise you, Cassidy, you will regret it. You are not just ruining your own life. You are ruining your father's." Click, screenshot, save. Another buzz, a text message. It was from D. Marla. "Cassidy, I can't talk. I'm sorry. They called me. Thomas called me. Not even 5 minutes after you left. He reminded me how much I rely on my family stipend. He said I must have misspoken tonight, that I was just confused and old. He said it would be a shame if I lost my apartment over a misunderstanding. I'm so sorry, child. I can't be involved. Be careful. They are watching." My blood ran cold. Thomas called her, not Veronica. My father, my weak, passive, conflict-avoidant father, had picked up the phone on Christmas night to threaten an elderly woman, his dead wife's aunt, with homelessness. He wasn't a bystander. He wasn't a coward. He was an active participant. Another buzz, a text from a blocked number. "Miss Cass, this is Hector. I am sorry. Mr. Rowan called my boss tonight. On Christmas. He told Mr. Henderson that I was stealing from the property and bothering the family. Mr. Henderson put me on suspension, effective immediately. I have 3 kids. Miss, I have a mortgage. I cannot lose this job. I am sorry. I cannot help you. I never gave you anything. Please do not call me." They were so fast, so brutal. They were cutting me off. Scorched earth. In less than an hour, they had silenced my only 2 allies, discredited me publicly, and threatened me privately. I sat in the dark hotel room, the silence roaring. It was just me against them. My phone lit up one more time. It was after 2 in the morning. Another DM, not from Veronica. This one was from an account with no profile picture. Just a default gray egg. The name was a random string of letters and numbers. I opened it. The message contained only one thing: an image. It was a photo of a document, taken at an angle, the lighting poor, clearly snapped in a hurry, but the words were legible. At the top, it said, Elaine Rowan Living Trust, Second Amendment. I zoomed in, my cold fingers clumsy on the screen. I scanned the dense legal jargon until I found the section. Successor trustee, guardian of assets. The primary successor was, as expected, Thomas Rowan. But beneath it, a contingent successor, a backup, in case my father was unable or unwilling to serve. The name listed, Rowan Family Holdings, LLC, managed by Veronica Hale. Rowan Family Holdings. I'd never heard of it. Managed by Veronica Hale. My eyes shot to the signature page. It was signed by Elaine Rowan. The signature looked real. It looked just like the handwriting on the card. But beside it, there was another signature. By proxy, Veronica Hale. Why? Why would my mother, who was so afraid of Veronica she was hiding keys and making gardeners swear oaths, give her proxy signature power? Why would she make a holding company run by Veronica the backup guardian of my inheritance? The inheritance DeMarla said was supposed to be in a separate fund? This document was the exact opposite of my mother's fears. This document legalized the erasure. A new message from the Gray Egg account appeared. This is what she is using. This is the document she filed. The original First Amendment is gone. Check the notary. Check the date she filed it with the county, not the date she signed it. My mind was racing. I looked at the notary stamp. The date was blurry, but it looked like it was after my mother's accident. I looked at the pink receipt from Hector's bag. Still on the desk. My mother paid for a 10-year safe deposit box rental just 3 weeks before her death. She wouldn't do that if she had just signed a new trust amendment putting her enemy in charge. She absolutely would not. Which meant the document in my phone, the one Veronica was using as her legal shield, was a fake. This wasn't just theft. This was high-level fraud, forgery, a conspiracy. Veronica's message replayed in my head. You are not just ruining your own life. You are ruining your father's. I finally understood. He knew. He wasn't just covering for her. He wasn't just a weak man who liked a post. He was in on it. He must have signed off on it. He had to be. The hotel room was silent. It was just me, the key, the receipt, the tape, and a JPEG of the lie. Veronica's ultimatum was 9 a.m. The bank opened at 9 a.m. I set my alarm for 7. I was going to be the first person through those doors. I didn't sleep. Sleep was a luxury for a life that wasn't collapsing. At 5 a.m. on December 26th, I was sitting on the floor of the beige hotel room, the mini DV tape in one hand, the brass key in the other. The city was dark. The bank wouldn't open for 4 hours. Veronica's ultimatum would expire in 4 hours. I was alone, outgunned, and publicly branded as unstable. My father had co-signed the lie. My allies had been threatened into silence. I was an amateur walking into a war that had been professionally waged against me for 10 years. I needed a professional of my own. My first call wasn't to a stranger. It was to Avery Cole, my college roommate, my first real friend outside my broken home, and now a brutally smart civil litigator in San Francisco. She picked up on the 4th ring, her voice a groggy, confused mumble. Cass, what's wrong? It's 5:03 in the morning, on the day after Christmas. Are you in jail? The words tumbled out of me, a raw, unfiltered stream of consciousness. The card, the slap, the key, Sunrise Federal, the public Facebook post, my father's like, the anonymous trust photo, the threats to Hector and DeMarla, Veronica's 9 a.m. deadline. Avery was silent. I heard a muffled sound, the click of a lamp, the rustle of sheets. When she spoke again, her voice was sharp, clear, and completely awake. Cassidy, stop. Just stop and listen to me. I stopped. This is not a family drama anymore, Avery said, her tone hard. You're not fighting for an apology. This is a felony. This is conspiracy to defraud. This is forgery, financial elder abuse, and libel. You are so far past needing a friend right now. You need a shark. Avery, I don't know. You do not, she cut me off. Under any circumstances, go to that bank alone. Do you hear me? That is the single worst thing you could do. They are waiting for you. They'll have their lawyer there. They'll seize whatever is in that box, and you will have broken the chain of custody. You will lose before you even begin. My stomach turned to ice. She was right. My firm doesn't handle this, Avery continued. This is specialized. You need someone who does nothing but dismantle fraudulent estates. You need Naomi Price. Who? Naomi Price. She's local, in Reno. She's the person people hire when they need to burn a corrupt trust to the ground. She is terrifying, she is expensive, and she does not lose. I'm texting you her number right now. Call her. Tell her Avery Cole sent you, and tell her it's an emergency. And Cass, from this moment on, you do exactly, precisely, what she tells you to do. My phone buzzed with the contact. I hung up with Avery, my hand trembling over the new number. It was 5:15 a.m. I dialed. The call didn't even ring. A crisp, recorded voice said, "Price Law Group, please hold." A single click, and then a human voice, sharp as glass, perfectly alert. "This is Naomi Price." "Ms. Price? My name is Cassidy Rowan, Avery Cole. She just recommended I call you. I'm sorry it's so early." "Avery doesn't waste time, and she doesn't make referrals lightly," the voice said. "She must think you're in serious trouble. You have my full attention. Start at the beginning." For the second time, I told the story. But this time, it wasn't an emotional plea. It was a report. I listed the events chronologically, clinically, the discovery, the assault, the key, the receipt, the mini DV tape, the public defamation, the private threats, the silencing of the witnesses, the anonymous photo of the fraudulent trust amendment. I heard nothing on the other end but the rapid, furious tapping of a keyboard. It was the most comforting sound in the world. "The receipt," Naomi said finally, her voice cutting through my narrative. "The pink carbon copy from Mr. Hector. Read me the date on it." I read it to her. 3 weeks before my mother's death. And the photo of the trust amendment, the one from the anonymous account, the one with Veronica Hale's proxy signature. What is the date on the notary stamp? I zoomed in on the blurry image. It looks like it's 2 days after my mother's accident. The typing stopped. The silence on the line was heavy. Absolute. "Ms. Rowan," Naomi said, and I could almost hear her smiling. "They're not just criminals. They're sloppy. A document notarized after the signatory's death isn't just fraudulent. It's an impossible, arrogant, glorious mistake. It's the whole case." "What do I do?" I whispered. "The bank opens at 9. Veronica wants the key by 9. "You will do nothing," Naomi commanded. "You will not answer any calls. You will not reply to any messages. Your plan to walk into that bank was suicide. You would have been walking into an ambush. Here's what we are going to do instead. I am personally meeting you in the lobby of your hotel at 8:30 a.m. We are not going to Sunrise Federal alone. We are going with a certified notary public and a bonded videographer. You and I will present the key, the lease receipt, and your identification. We will have the bank manager escort us. We will document the opening of the vault. We will film, inventory, and notarize every single item in that box before it is touched by anyone else. This is not a family errand. Ms. Rowan, this is the execution of a search warrant." I sank onto the bed, weak with relief. I don't know if I can afford all that. Ms. Price, a videographer, a notary, on a holiday. "Avery Cole sent you," she said simply, "and based on the evidence you've provided, your mother didn't just leave you a key. She left you a loaded gun. That receipt, dated while she was alive, proves her state of mind. The fraudulent trust, dated after she was dead, proves their conspiracy. This is a pure contingency case. We will discuss my fee, which will be a percentage of the assets we recover. After we recover them, now, I am sending you a link to a secure portal. I want you to upload the picture of the key and the receipt. I want every screenshot of the Facebook post, the like from your father, and every private message from Veronica. I want the photo of that trust. I will see you in 2 hours. And Cassidy, welcome to the fight." I hung up and did exactly as she said. The files uploaded, one by one. For the first time in a decade, I wasn't alone. But I wasn't finished. Naomi was handling the offense. I had to protect my allies. I called Hector first. He answered on the first ring, his voice a terrified whisper. "Miss Cass, I told you. I cannot. Mr. Henderson suspended me. I have a family." "Hector, listen to me," I said, my voice low and urgent. "I have a lawyer. Her name is Naomi Price. She is the best. She told me what your boss and Mr. Rowan did is called witness intimidation, and it is highly illegal." "Illegal? Miss, I need my job." "I know, and we will protect you. You don't have to do anything but tell the truth. Would you be willing to sign a sworn statement, an affidavit, just saying exactly what you told me? That my mother gave you that bag, and what she said when she gave it to you? My lawyer will protect you. She can send a letter to your boss that will make him terrified to ever speak to you again, let alone fire you." There was a long pause. I heard him take a shaky breath. "Miss Elaine, she was a good lady. She always gave me extra cash at Christmas. For my kids. She said, 'This is for you, Hector, not for the house.' That Veronica. She watched me like a hawk. Made me itemize receipts for fertilizer." He let out a long breath. Yes, I will sign it. For Miss Elaine, I will say what she said. Keep it safe." "Thank you. Hector, stay by your phone. Someone from her office will call you." One more call. Marla. She picked up, her voice frail. "Cassidy, child, you cannot call me. Thomas. He meant what he said. My stipend. It's all I have." "Marla, I have a lawyer. Naomi Price. We are handling the stipend. We are handling Thomas. But I need your memory. You told me you argued with my father about a fund, a graduate school fund." "It was real," she whispered, a sudden spark in her voice. "I know it was. Elaine was so proud of it. She set it up, a small trust, just for you. She signed the papers." "I remember. She signed them at her birthday party, the one before she got sick. I was there. I took photographs. It was a lovely day." My heart hammered against my ribs. "Photographs? Marla, you have photographs of her signing papers at her birthday party?" "Of course, dear. I have all my albums, boxes and boxes of them. I never throw away a memory." The anonymous trust photo flashed in my mind. The dark, angled shot. The forgery. Marla. The document they are using. The one Veronica is using. It's a fake. My lawyer is certain of it. Your photos. They could prove the real trust. They could prove the real signing day. They're an alibi. The frail, terrified whisper was gone. In its place was the cold, clear anger of an old woman who had been dismissed. That woman," Marla spat. "She told Thomas I was confused. She said I was too emotional to come to the house after the funeral. I'll find them, Cassidy. I'll find those pictures if I have to pull every box out of the attic. I'll show them who is confused." "Thank you. Just find them, and stay safe." I hung up as an email notification lit up my phone. It was from Naomi. Files received. As I suspected, the notary on that trust amendment has a history. His license was suspended 2 years ago for backdating documents. This is better than I'd hoped. She had attached 2 letters. The first, she wrote, is a cease and desist, demanding the immediate removal of the defamatory Facebook post. The second is a preservation of documents and notice of imminent litigation, addressed to both Veronica Hale and Thomas Rowan. It informs them that all digital, physical, and financial records pertaining to the Elaine Rowan Trust are to be considered legal evidence. It explicitly warns them that any contact with witnesses, including Hector or Marla, will be considered tampering. A courier is on his way to serve them at the house right now. This will stop the bleeding. A final attachment, a retainer agreement, authorizing her to act on my behalf in all matters, including public relations. Cassidy, the email concluded, this is your final exit. They are ruthless, and they have a 10-year head start. If you sign this, we are not settling for a quiet apology. We are going for a full recovery of all assets, plus damages. We will take back your mother's legacy, and we will take back your name. If you sign this, we go all the way. I walked to the hotel's sad little business center, the key cold in my pocket. I printed the agreement. I thought of my mother, hiding her last hope in a gardener's shed. I thought of my father's blue thumb, a casual, public betrayal. I signed my name, Cassidy Rowan. The loops of my signature were strong and clear. I scanned the document and emailed it back to Naomi with a single sentence. I'm not backing down. Her reply came in less than a minute. Good. Then we go all the way. I'm in the lobby. I met Naomi Price in the hotel lobby at exactly 8:30 in the morning. She was not what I expected. She was small, impeccably dressed in a dark gray suit, and wore her hair pulled back so tightly it looked severe. She carried a sleek, hard-sided briefcase and moved with an energy that seemed to cut the air around her. She didn't offer a hug or a comforting smile. She just gave me a single, assessing nod. You look better than I expected, she said, her voice as crisp as the morning air. Did you sleep? No, I said. Good. You need to be sharp. She gestured to two other people standing by the door, a man in a rumpled suit holding a video camera, and a woman carrying a heavy leather satchel. This is our videographer, Mr. Evans, and our notary, Ms. Klein. They will record and attest to everything we find. From this moment on, you are a client, and this is a chain of evidence. Do not speak unless I ask you a question. Do not react. You are here as an observer. Let me handle everything. We drove to Sunrise Federal in 2 separate cars. The branch was just as I remembered from my childhood. A modest, single-story brick building from the 1970s, dwarfed by the newer, glittering glass towers of the casinos. It felt like a relic from a different, quieter Reno. We were there at 8:50 a.m., 10 minutes before opening. Naomi's ultimatum to Veronica would expire in 10 minutes. My phone, which I'd set to Do Not Disturb, was silent, but I could imagine the storm of messages and missed calls building on the other side. At precisely 9 a.m., the glass doors unlocked from the inside. We were the first ones in. The interior was a time capsule, faded blue carpet, wood veneer paneling, and the same pale green vinyl chairs I'd sat in as a child. A bored-looking teller looked up from her computer. Naomi did not approach the counter. She walked directly to the small, frosted glass door marked Branch Manager. She knocked twice. A man in his late 50s, with a tired face and a slightly too large suit, opened the door. Can I help you? I am Naomi Price, she said, handing him a card. I am legal counsel for Ms. Cassidy Rowan. We are here to access her safe deposit box. Number 1432. This is Ms. Rowan. This is Ms. Klein, a notary public, and this is Mr. Evans, a videographer. They will be accompanying us. The manager, a Mr. Davies, looked completely bewildered. A videographer? We don't allow filming in the bank. It's a security policy. It's not a request, Naomi said, her voice unyieldingly polite. We are here to document the execution of Ms. Rowan's rights as a beneficiary. This is a private room, and it is a necessary part of our legal discovery. If you would like to call your bank's counsel, you are welcome to, but they will tell you to comply, or that you can check the box's lease agreement. I'm sure your bank values its reputation for honoring its contracts. Davies hesitated, his eyes flitting from Naomi's hard gaze to the impassive camera lens. He swallowed. Let me get the access ledger. We were ushered into his small, cluttered office. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. Miss Klein, the notary, opened her satchel and began filling out the header of a document, noting the date, time, and all parties present, Mr. Evans, the videographer, stood in the corner, the small red record light on his camera glowing like a judgment. Davies returned with a large, dusty binder. He opened it. "Rowan, Elaine," he murmured, running his finger down a page. "Box 1432. Okay. I see the original lease agreement from—" He squinted. 10 years ago, and the beneficiary designation." "And who," Naomi asked, "is listed as the sole beneficiary, with full rights of access upon the death of Elaine Rowan?" Davies looked at me, then back at the paper. "Ms. Cassidy Rowan. That's you. I'll need 2 forms of ID. Ms. Rowan." I slid my driver's license and my passport across the desk. My hands were perfectly steady. Davies compared the photos to my face, his eyes lingering for a moment on the dark, blooming bruise on my cheek. He said nothing about it. "And," I said, my voice clear, "I have the key." I placed the small brass key on the desk. Davies nodded, seemingly relieved to be on solid procedural ground. "Very well, if you'll all follow me to the vault." We walked in a silent, bizarre procession. Davies, then Naomi, then me, with the notary and the videographer bringing up the rear, the camera's lens capturing everything. We passed the tellers, who were now openly staring at our strange entourage. Davies unlocked the heavy, grated steel door to the safe deposit vault. The air inside was cold, dry, and smelled of old paper and metal. It was a small room, lined floor to ceiling with gleaming stainless steel doors, a single harsh fluorescent panel overhead. "Mr. Evans, please remain by the door, but keep the box and Ms. Rowan in frame at all times," Naomi instructed. "Mr. Davies, will you please insert the bank's key?" He did. Then he stepped back. "Now, your key, Ms. Rowan." I stepped forward. The brass key slid into the second lock. The sound was high-pitched and smooth. I turned it. A heavy, satisfying clunk echoed in the small room. Davies reached forward, pulled a small handle, and slid a long, thin metal box from the wall. "Box 1432, he announced. He carried it over to a small, private viewing booth inside the vault, a tiny cubicle with a desk and a chair. He placed the metal box on the desk, and then looked at Naomi. "Thank you, Mr. Davies," Naomi said. "We will call you when we are finished." He nodded gratefully and exited the vault, pulling the grate closed, but not locking it. It was just the 4 of us in the vault. "Ms. Klein, please set up your log," Naomi said. She snapped on a pair of thin white cotton gloves. "Mr. Evans, focus on the box. Cassidy, you will not touch anything." Naomi lifted the simple, unlocked metal lid. It was not full, but it was not empty. My breath caught. On top, there was a thick, cream-colored envelope. My name, Cassidy, was written on the front in my mother's strong, familiar hand. "Item 1, Naomi said. 1 sealed, personal envelope, addressed to Cassidy." The notary dutifully wrote it down. I stared at the envelope. This was it. The real one. The one Veronica hadn't torn. "We will open that last," Naomi said gently. She reached back into the box. "Item 2, 1 SanDisk USB flash drive, 8 gigabytes. She set it aside. "Item 3. She lifted out a thick blue legal-sized folder, bound with a ribbon. 1 last will and testament. "Item 4. She lifted a second, identical blue folder. 1 revocable living trust for the Elaine Rowan Trust. She opened the cover of the trust. "Ms. Klein, please note, we are verifying the signature page. Signed, Elaine Rowan, notarized by David M. Phelps." She looked at me. Not the same notary as the forgery. "Item 5. She pulled out a small, stapled set of papers. 1 First Amendment to the Elaine Rowan Trust." My heart was pounding so hard I could feel it in my throat. This was the moment. Naomi read the document, her fingers scanning the page. Her face was impassive. She read for a full minute, and then she looked up at me. "As we suspected," she said, "this amendment, signed by your mother after she became ill, makes one change. It confirms that upon her death, all assets held in the Elaine Rowan Academic Fund and the Elaine Rowan Investment Account are to be transferred immediately and solely to the beneficiary, Cassidy Rowan. There is no mention of Rowan Family Holdings. There is no mention, anywhere, of Veronica Hale. I sagged against the wall, the notary's pen scratched in the silence. Item 6, Naomi continued, pulling out a thin sheaf of papers. Bank statements. She fanned them out. The last one is dated 2 months after your mother's death. How is that possible? I whispered. It's a transfer statement, Naomi said, her voice tightening. A single wire transfer for the entire balance of the Elaine Rowan investment account, a sum in the high 6 figures, transferred to Rowan Family Holdings, LLC. The shell company? But how? I asked. She was dead. Because, Naomi said, tapping the forged trust amendment I had sent her. They used this forgery, filed with the county, gave Veronica proxy power. They must have presented it to a different bank, one that held the investment account, not this one. They used it to drain the account, and no one ever checked. They probably assumed this box here at Sunrise was just for sentimental items. She paused. They didn't know your mother was smarter than they were. She looked back in the box. That's everything, except... She picked up the cream-colored envelope with my name on it and handed it to me. This one is yours. My fingers were numb. I broke the wax seal my mother had pressed into the back, and inside, there was a single, folded piece of stationery. My dearest Cass, it read, if you are reading this, then my worst fears have come true. I am gone, and the woman who is with your father has tried to erase me. She has tried to rewrite our history, and she has tried to steal what I worked so hard to leave for you. I put my hand to my mouth. The videographer's lens did not waver. I cannot fight her from here. The letter continued. So I am leaving you the tools. In the blue folders are the truth, the original, legally binding documents, but the most important thing is on the USB drive. It is my memory. Cass, it is my voice. Do not let her silence me. Do not let her tell you I was a mess. Do not let her tell you I was confused. The only thing I was confused about was how your father, a good man, could be so blinded by fear and loneliness. There is a video on this drive. Show it to him. Show it to the world, if you must. This is not about money, my love. It is about your story. Do not let anyone else hold the pen. I love you more than all the words. Mom. The USB, I said, my voice thick. We have to watch the video. We will, Naomi said. She pulled a slim laptop from her briefcase. We will do it right here, on camera, witnessed by the notary. She plugged the drive in. A single file folder appeared. Inside, there were PDFs, scans of the original trust, the real amendment, the bank statements, and one video file, titled, For Cass, Play This. Naomi double-clicked it. My mother's face filled the screen. She was in her study, the one with the crooked bookshelf, the one Veronica had torn out. She looked tired, thinner than I remembered, the sickness already taking hold, but her eyes were bright, fierce. Hi, Cass, she said. Her voice, it was 10 years gone, and it was right here in this vault, and I broke. A sob tore out of my chest, a sound I had held back since I was 19. I crumpled against the wall, my hand over my mouth, as the tears I refused to shed in Veronica's house came in a hot, silent flood. Naomi placed a firm hand on my shoulder. Let it play, Cassidy, she said, her voice quiet but firm. Let the evidence speak. My mother on the screen looked right into the camera, right at me. If you are seeing this, she said, her voice full of a terrible, sad strength, it means my worrying was right. I am gone, and I am worried about what is happening in our house. She took a breath. I am trying to protect you. Cass, I have set up a fund. It's for your graduate school, for your future. I've signed the papers. It is separate. It is yours. But I am getting resistance. Your father is afraid. And Veronica. She is very interested in our finances. She is always asking about the estate. She is always organizing my desk. I feel like I am being pushed out of my own life, pushed out of my own memory before I am even gone. Her eyes filled with tears, but she did not let them fall. Cassidy, do not let them rewrite our history. Do not let them edit me into someone I was not. If you are ever made to feel small in your own home, if anyone tries to take what is yours, you fight. You use these documents. You use my voice. You take back your story. She leaned in close. I love you. Be brave. The screen went black. The silence in the vault was absolute, broken only by my choked breathing and the quiet scratching of the notary's pen. I wiped my face, my hands shaking. I looked at Naomi. The mask of the professional was gone. Her eyes were dark and filled with a cold, controlled fury. She carefully unplugged the USB. She handed the original to Ms. Klein. Bagged, sealed, and itemized. We will make copies, but the original chain of custody ends here. She picked up her laptop and shut it. She looked at me, really looked at me. The bruise on my face, the tear tracks. Cassidy, she said, her voice dropping to a low, powerful register. Your mother didn't just leave you a video. She left us a star witness. We have the forgery. We have the illegal transfer. We have the motive. And now, we have the victim's testimony, from her own mouth. She snapped her briefcase shut. We don't just have a foundation. We have the entire case. We are filing an emergency injunction this afternoon to freeze every account associated with Rowan Family Holdings, and then, we are suing them for everything they took, and more. We didn't go back to the hotel. We went straight to Naomi Price's office, a high-rise fortress of glass and steel that overlooked the entire Reno Valley. The moment we stepped off the elevator, her team was mobilized. This wasn't a law office. It was a war room. We have everything, Naomi announced to 2 waiting associates and a paralegal who looked as sharp and sleep-deprived as I felt. Elaine Rowan's testimony is on this drive. The original trust is here. The illegal transfer is confirmed. Her voice was a rapid-fire volley of commands. File the ex parte petition for temporary injunction, now. I want a full asset freeze on Rowan Family Holdings, LLC, effective immediately. I want a temporary restraining order against Veronica Hale and Thomas Rowan, preventing the destruction of any and all financial records, digital or physical, dating back 10 years, and draft the libel takedown notice. I want it all served before noon. By 1 p.m, it was done. A courier had served the papers at my father's house. A legal iron curtain had slammed down. They were now legally barred from moving money, deleting emails, or shredding a single piece of paper. The defamation letter was just as blunt. Immediately retract the false and malicious statements regarding my mental health and issue a public apology, or a suit for defamation per se would be added to the complaint. I had expected stunned silence. I had expected a panicked private phone call. I had, once again, underestimated Veronica's audacity. The original Facebook post vanished, as demanded, but at 4 p.m., a new one appeared. This one was, in its own way, a work of art. It was a photo of me at 15, awkward and sullen, flanked by a brightly smiling Veronica and my father. As many of you know, our family is facing a painful private challenge, she wrote, her tone dripping with martyred compassion. We have been advised by our counsel not to speak on the details, but I must defend my husband. It is a profound tragedy when a child decides to revise the past to fit a narrative of perceived victimhood. We love Cassidy dearly, but we will not stand by while she attempts to destroy her father's reputation over complex paperwork from a decade ago that she simply does not understand. This attempt to claim funds that were never hers has devastated us. We ask for your prayers, especially for Thomas. It was brilliant. Revise the past. Misunderstood paperwork, destroy her father's reputation. She had reframed the narrative, I was no longer the abused daughter. I was the greedy, confused aggressor. And my father, the man who had enabled her, was now the primary victim. The public response was immediate and divisive. Her church friends and business associates flooded her wall with support. "This is heartbreaking. V, we know your character." Disgusting how some children are. It's all about money. But this time, a new faction appeared. People who had known my mother. This doesn't sound like the Elaine I knew. Elaine was meticulous. Misunderstood paperwork sounds like a cover story. I remember Cassidy. She's a good kid. This is very strange. The battle lines were drawn, and the war was now being fought on two fronts, the courts and the court of public opinion. "I have to respond," I said, my fingers hovering over my phone. "I have to tell them the truth, about the slap, about the bank." "You will do absolutely nothing." Naomi's voice cut through my anger. She was staring at the post on her monitor, her expression one of cold analysis. "You are the plaintiff. You do not engage in a public food fight. She wants you to look unhinged. She wants you to rant in her comment section. You will not give her the satisfaction." She picked up her phone and dialed. "Mark, it's Naomi. I've got one. A public trust dispute. The defendant is a master manipulator, and my client is currently being painted as a greedy, unstable daughter. I need you to handle it." She listened. "Good. Mark Kelleher. This is Cassidy Rowan. Mark is the best crisis PR consultant in the state. From this moment on, you have one public statement, and one only. My attorney, Naomi Price, is handling this matter, and I have full faith in the legal process. You will not say another word. We will win this in the courtroom, not on Facebook." It was the hardest thing I'd ever had to do. I logged out of all my social media accounts. I made myself a ghost. But the moment the legal filings hit the public record, the cracks in Veronica's 10-year-old story began to show, and people started to crawl out of the woodwork. The first email came 2 days later, from the same anonymous gray egg account that had sent me the forged trust. "You're on the right path," it read. "I used to be the accountant for Rowan Family Holdings. I quit 2 years ago when I realized what she was doing. It wasn't just your mother's money. The holding company was a personal slush fund." My heart hammered. I called Naomi and put her on speaker. "She expensed everything through it," I read. Her car, her vacations, her designer clothes, her country club membership, all labeled as corporate expenses or asset management fees. "The money from your mother's investment account was the seed capital, but she's been draining it for years. But here's the real evidence. She got sloppy. The bank records you have will show the wire transfer from the investment account happened in March, after your mother's death, but the accounting ledgers she filed with the IRS for the holding company claim that same money as an initial investment received in January, before your mother's death. She was trying to make the timeline look clean, but the bank and the IRS have two different stories. She's not just a thief, she's committed tax fraud. I'm attaching a comparative timeline I made before I left. Use it." I forwarded the attachment to Naomi. Her response was a low whistle. "She didn't just hang herself," Naomi murmured. "She built the gallows and sent us an invitation." But Veronica and my father were fighting back, not with law, but with terror. A frantic, sobbing call came from Hector. "Miss Cass, a man. He came to my house. He gave me papers. They are suing me." "What? Suing you for what?" He said conspiracy to disclose proprietary information and breach of loyalty. They say I stole from them, that I stole the mini DV tape. They are suing me for $50,000. "Naomi," I said, holding out the phone. She took it, her voice turning to pure ice. "Mr. Flores, this is Naomi Price. I am Ms. Rowan's attorney. The document you are holding is a textbook frivolous slap suit, a strategic lawsuit against public participation. It is a pathetic, illegal scare tactic. I am filing a motion to dismiss on your behalf this afternoon, and I am countersuing Thomas Rowan and Veronica Hale personally for witness intimidation. You are now a material witness under the protection of my office. You will not be fired, and you will not pay them a single dime. They just made a very, very expensive mistake. She hung up and looked at me. They're desperate. They're trying to burn the ground around us. No sooner had she said it than my phone buzzed with a text from Marla. It wasn't a message. It was a picture. A picture from a physical photo album. The colors were faded, that yellowish tint of a print from the 1990s, but the content was electrifying. It was my mother, Elaine, radiant, at her own birthday party. She was laughing, holding a pen, and signing a stack of blue-backed legal documents. Standing beside her, raising a glass of champagne, was a younger Marla, and in the background, a large hand-painted banner read, "Happy 50th, Elaine." "Found it, dear," the text read. The day she signed the real trust. I remember she joked that she was giving herself a gift for her 50th. Your future. The date on the back of the photo is July 14th, 1999. The exact date on the trust documents from the safe deposit box, the photographic evidence of the real signing, a full year before the sickness, and an undeniable alibi against the forgery. I stared at the picture. My father was nowhere to be seen. He was probably grabbing drinks or working the room. He wasn't a part of this moment. He wasn't a witness. I realized the crushing, suffocating nature of the trap he was in. He had threatened Marla. He had tried to get Hector fired. He had liked Veronica's post. He had tied his entire life, his reputation, and his freedom to her lies. If he turned on her now, he would be admitting his own complicity. He would lose his marriage, his standing in the community, and he could face criminal charges himself. But if he continued to lie for her, he would be committing perjury. He would be lying against a photograph, against bank records, against my mother's own voice on tape. He would lose me, and his soul, forever. Naomi was relentless. The new evidence was rocket fuel. We have the accountant's timeline. We have the photographic alibi. Now, we go for the kill shot, she said. She filed a new motion. Motion to compel forensic handwriting analysis. She wasn't just targeting the forged trust amendment. She was targeting every single document Veronica had signed by proxy or as manager of the holding company, the wire transfer request, the power of attorney she must have filed, the tax documents. We're not just going to prove the one document is fake, Naomi explained. We're going to prove her entire financial existence for the last 10 years has been built on a single act of forgery. We will prove that every signature she's written since was unauthorized, dismantling the entire house of cards. The court approved the motion. The local news, which had been treating the story as a salacious family spat, suddenly snapped to attention. The flurry of legal filings, the injunction, the witness intimidation suit, the motion for forensic analysis, was blood in the water. That night, the lead story on the 10 o'clock news was a picture of my parents' house, juxtaposed with a picture of the courthouse. The case now being called the Christmas Trust Dispute escalated today, the anchor said, his voice grim. As court filings allege forgery, conspiracy, and systematic witness intimidation, sources close to the case suggest a former accountant has provided evidence of potential tax fraud, and a judge has just ordered a forensic analysis of the defendant's signatures. I watched it from my hotel room, my body numb. It was no longer a secret. My phone buzzed, a blocked number, a new text message. It was one sentence. Don't drag your father down with her. He's a weak man. But only one person wrote this script. She's the director. He's just a bad actor. I returned to Portland, but the fight had followed me. I was no longer just a content manager. I was the plaintiff in a high-profile lawsuit, and my life had become a full-time remote job of reviewing discovery, answering interrogatories, and managing a constant low-grade thrum of anxiety. My apartment in Portland, my safe harbor, now felt like a temporary outpost. The lawsuit was in Reno, the trauma was in Reno, and my father was in Reno, a silent co-defendant. Until the day he wasn't. It was a Tuesday, 2 weeks after the news story had broken. My apartment buzzer rang, a harsh, unexpected sound, I was not expecting anyone. I looked at the grainy, black and white security feed by my door. My blood ran cold. It was my father, not in his house, not in his element. He was here, on my doorstep. He had flown from Reno to Portland. He was wearing a rumpled coat I didn't recognize. His hair was a mess, and he looked smaller, older, and completely adrift. He was holding nothing. I buzzed him in. This was the first time in my adult life he had ever come to me, ever entered my world uninvited. I opened my door and he just stood there in the hallway, his eyes scanning my face, my apartment over my shoulder, my books, my plants, my life. "Cassidy," he said. His voice was a dry rasp. I didn't know where else to go. Can I come in?" I stepped aside. The silence was heavy, suffocating. He walked into the middle of my living room and just stood there, a man who had lost his orbit. "Why are you here, Dad?" My voice was flat, devoid of the emotion he was clearly expecting. I was not the girl from Christmas Eve. He sank onto my sofa, though I hadn't offered him a seat. "The lawyers," he began, his voice barely a whisper. They're taking everything apart, the house, the accounts, the letters from Naomi. They come every day. They're asking for everything." He looked down at his hands, which were trembling. She's not the woman I thought. She's furious, not scared. Cass, furious, at me." "Who did you think she was?" I asked, crossing my arms. "She was organized," he mumbled, a pathetic, practiced excuse. "After your mother, after Elaine, everything was chaos. You remember, I didn't know how to pay the bills. I didn't know where the insurance papers were. She was the artist, the dreamer, and I was lost." He was trying to build a defense, right here on my couch. "Then Veronica came," he continued, gaining a small, desperate momentum. "And suddenly, everything was in folders. Everything was tidy. She just handled everything. She was so capable." "So you let her," I stated. It wasn't a question. "She would just put papers in front of me," he said, his voice pleading now. "At my desk, at breakfast. Just sign this. Thomas, it's for the taxes. Just sign this, honey. It's for the corporate filing. This is just a formality for the estate. I signed them. I trusted her." He finally looked at me, his eyes wide and wet. "I didn't read them, Cass. I swear to God, I never read them." It was the best confession he could muster, that he was negligent, not malicious, that he was a fool, not a criminal. He had driven 5 hours and flown 2 more to deliver this flimsy, self-serving apology. I said nothing. I walked to my desk, picked up my laptop, and sat in the chair opposite him. I plugged in the encrypted thumb drive that held the digital copy of my mother's life. I turned the laptop around so the screen faced him, and I hit play. My mother's face filled my living room. Not the sick, fading woman he'd likely chosen to remember. This was her in the study. Tired, yes, but fierce. Her voice, the voice he hadn't heard in 10 years, was clear and strong. "Hi, Cass," she said. My father made a sound, a choked, strangled, painful sound, as if he'd been punched. He physically recoiled, his hands gripping the sofa cushions. He stared at the screen, mesmerized. He watched her talk about the sickness. He watched her talk about her fear, about feeling like she was being pushed out and edited. He watched her, his dead wife, warn her daughter about the very woman he had just defended. He heard her say, "I am worried about what is happening in our house." I didn't watch the screen. I watched him. His face, which had been pale and pleading, crumpled. It was a total collapse. The facade of the busy husband who trusted too much dissolved, and all that was left was the raw, gaping, ugly wound of a man who knew exactly what he had done. When the screen faded to black, he didn't move. He just stared at the blank screen, his whole body shaking. "Do you even remember her?" I asked. my voice barely a whisper. Do you still recognize the voice of the woman you loved? That broke him. He put his head in his hands, and a dry, racking sob tore through him. It was a terrible sound, the sound of a decade of compacted, buried guilt erupting. I was so alone, he whispered, his voice thick and broken, his words muffled by his hands. After she was gone, the house was it was so quiet. I couldn't breathe. Cass, I thought I was going to die of it. I was so scared. And then Veronica was just there. She was alive, he continued, lifting his head, his eyes red and raw, the tears cutting paths through the stubble on his cheeks. She was solid. She planned meals. She balanced the checkbook. She wasn't Elaine, God knows. She wasn't, but she was there. She wasn't a ghost. He was confessing now, the real confession. And then she took over. It was small at first. Let me handle the investments. Thomas, you're too emotional right now. And so I let her. Then my friends, my old friends, Elaine's friends, they stopped calling. She said they were depressing. She said we needed new energy. And one by one, they were gone. Until it was just her. Just her friends, her money, her rules. I've been a guest in my own house for 9 years. Cass. Then why? I asked, my voice turning hard. The video was over. The sympathy was over. Why did you like that post? Why did you call and threaten DeMarla? Why did you try to get Hector fired? That wasn't weakness. Dad, that was action. That was your action. He flinched, as if I'd slapped him. The shame was a toxic, physical presence in the room. I couldn't, he stammered, looking away. I can't leave her. I'm trapped. Trapped by what? Your reputation? The money? You're a coward. By a debt, he said. The words choked. An old debt. Years ago, before I even met your mother, I made a bad investment. A stupid risk. I borrowed money I shouldn't have, and I lost it all. It took me years. But I paid it back. Every dime. It almost ruined me. But I cleared it. But I told her. I told Veronica. In a weak moment, when we were first married, I told her everything. He took a shaky breath. She never forgot. She said she kept the proof, the letters, the promissory notes, just for safekeeping, the night the news story broke. She reminded me. She pulled them out of her desk. She said if I didn't stand with her, if I didn't make the calls, if I didn't back her play, she would release those old letters. She would let the world know what kind of failure I really was. She said it would ruin my name, that no one would ever trust me in business again. She said she'd made me, and she would unmake me. It was the most pathetic, cowardly thing I had ever heard. He had traded me, my inheritance, and my mother's memory for his own pride. Blackmail over a paid debt. So you chose her, I said. It wasn't a question. I didn't know what to do, he cried, his voice cracking. She's my wife. But you're my daughter. And Elaine, seeing her on that tape. I picked up my phone. I stood and walked onto my small balcony. The cold, damp Portland air a welcome. Clarifying shock. I dialed Naomi. He's here, I said, my voice low. In my apartment. He's confessing everything. He says she's blackmailing him. He's a complete wreck. Naomi was silent for a beat. When she spoke, her voice was pure ice. He's not a wreck, Cassidy. He's shopping. He's testing the waters. He's here to see if you'll go easy on him if he cries hard enough. Do not fall for it. He seems broken, Naomi. He's an accomplice, she snapped. He signed papers that facilitated a felony. He benefited from the theft for 10 years. He actively committed witness intimidation. It doesn't matter why he did it. Now, listen to me. You do not offer him forgiveness. You do not offer him a deal. You are the plaintiff. You offer him exactly one thing, a choice. What choice? He's a defendant in a multi-million-dollar lawsuit, and he's facing a criminal referral. If he wants to save any part of his life, he has one move. He stops talking to you, and he starts talking to my office. We can offer him a proffer agreement. He comes in as a friendly witness, and he tells us everything. He gives us the dates, the accounts, the conversations, the proof of her blackmail. He becomes our star witness against his own wife. In exchange, we might consider his cooperation when we assess damages against him. That's it. And if he says no? Then I will enjoy destroying him in court, right alongside her. This is his only exit. Cassidy, offer it to him, and stop calling him Dad. He's a defendant. I hung up and walked back inside. He was standing exactly where I left him, a statue of a man waiting for his verdict. You have one chance, I said, my voice as cold as Naomi's. It's not from me. It's from my lawyer. You can't fix this with me. This is a legal matter. I laid it out, the proffer, the meeting, the testimony, becoming a witness against Veronica. I'm not asking you to choose between me and her, I said, repeating Naomi's brutal logic. I'm not your daughter right now. I'm the plaintiff. I am telling you, factually, this is your only option that doesn't end in your total personal and financial ruin. You have to choose the truth. That's the only deal you get. He stared at me, the path I was offering him clear and terrifying. He would have to go back to Reno and face her, not as a broken man, but as a traitor. He would have to actively betray the woman who had held his leash for 10 years. He was silent for a full, agonizing minute. I could see the war behind his eyes, the fear of her, the shame of what he'd become, the ghost of my mother on the laptop screen. Okay, he whispered, his voice cracking. Okay, I'll do it. I'll meet with her. I'll meet with Naomi. It was the first truly brave thing he'd done in a decade. As if summoned by the decision, his phone, sitting on my coffee table, lit up with a furious series of texts. He hadn't told her he was coming here. We both looked at it. The screen was bright, an angry beacon. From Veronica. Where are you? Your lawyers are calling me. They say you're missing. From Veronica. Thomas, you answer me right now. If you are with her, I swear to God. From Veronica. You soft-hearted fool. You're going to let that little gravedigger ruin us? You think she's going to forgive you? You are nothing without me. My father looked at the phone, at the illuminated, venomous words from his wife. He looked at me, standing by my desk, my mother's voice still hanging in the air of my apartment. He walked over to the phone. He didn't text back. He didn't crumble. He pressed and held the power button, his thumb steady. The screen went black. He shut it off. For the first time in 10 years, he had chosen silence over her. My father's cooperation was a secret weapon, held in reserve. He had returned to Reno, to the house he shared with Veronica, playing the part of the conflicted, supportive husband. He was now Naomi's mole. But Veronica, blind to her husband's defection, believed she still controlled the narrative. And like any good narcissist cornered, she didn't retreat. She threw a party. It was billed as the annual winter benefit for the Children's Advocacy Center, a charity my mother had actually supported. It was Veronica's attempt to launder her reputation, a desperate, glittering PR move. She had invited every major local journalist, every business partner, every pillar of the Reno community. The message was clear. I am untouchable. I am still the queen. Naomi had secured us 3 tickets. We are not crashing the party. Cassidy, she had instructed me, DeMarla, and Hector in the car. We are invited guests. We will be polite. We will be silent. And we will let her spring the trap on herself. I walked into the grand ballroom of the private club. The air was warm, smelling of expensive perfume and prime rib. Golden light dripped from crystal chandeliers. Veronica was near the entrance, a vision in emerald green silk, her hand on the arm of the club president, laughing. She saw us. The laugh froze. Her eyes, for a fraction of a second, showed pure, unadulterated panic. Me, the unstable stepdaughter, Dee Marla, the confused old relative, and Hector, the thieving gardener. We were her three victims, standing in the lobby, dressed not in rags, but in our best. I was calm. I simply nodded at her, as if I were any other guest, and walked past. Veronica quickly recovered, her hostess smile snapping back into place, but her eyes followed us. As she was turning back to the club president, a nondescript man in a suit stepped in front of her. "Ms. Veronica Hale?" he asked. "Yes," she said, annoyed by the interruption. "You are served," he said, placing a thick white envelope in her hand. It was Naomi's masterpiece, a subpoena duces tecum, a non-negotiable demand, backed by the court, for the immediate production of the original accounting ledgers for Rowan Family Holdings, the ones the anonymous accountant had told us were faked. Veronica's face went white. She looked wildly around, saw Naomi standing coolly by the coat check, and shoved the envelope into her purse. The local press, milling by the bar, saw the exchange. They saw the legal envelope. They saw her panic. The narrative was already shifting. We took our table in the back. The party continued, but the air was now charged. People were whispering, glancing from Veronica to our table. At 9 p.m., the lights dimmed. Veronica, having composed herself with a glass of champagne, walked to the podium. A spotlight hit her. "Thank you all for coming," she began, her voice smooth and practiced. "In times like these, times of challenge, we are reminded of what truly matters. We are reminded that the only thing that endures, the only thing we can truly rely on, is family." She looked right at me, a subtle, pitying smile on her lips. "Family is the foundation. It is the bedrock of our lives. It is the safe harbor we return to, and like any foundation, it must be protected. From storms, from cracks, from anything that seeks to undermine it." "A beautiful sentiment, Veronica," a voice said. It wasn't mine. It was Naomi. She was standing at the AV booth at the back of the room. Veronica froze. "Excuse me? This is a private—" "I agree," Naomi said, her voice amplified by the room's sound system. "Family is the foundation, which is why we felt it was so important to honor the original founder of this charity effort, Elaine Rowan." And on the two massive screens flanking the stage, where a slideshow of smiling children had been playing, a new image appeared. My mother's face. The ballroom went utterly, profoundly silent. The clinking of forks, the murmurs, the music, all ceased. My mother's voice, her strong, clear voice from the mini DV tape, filled the room. "Hi, Cass, if you are seeing this, it means my worrying was right. I am gone." Veronica gripped the podium, her knuckles white. "Turn this off," she shrieked. "Turn this off right now. This is a violation." "This is a court-ordered exhibit," Naomi's voice boomed, cutting her off. "And we have permission from the venue. Please, everyone, listen to the founder." The video continued. My mother's face, her tired, brave eyes, looked out over the 300 wealthiest people in Reno. They were rapt. I feel like I am being pushed out of my own life, pushed out of my own memory before I am even gone. I watched the room. People were looking at Veronica with a new, dawning horror. "Cassidy, do not let them rewrite our history. Do not let them edit me into someone I was not." The video ended. The screens went black. The silence was a physical weight. Naomi walked to the front of the room, taking a second microphone. "For 10 years, Naomi said, her voice resonating with cold, legal power, "Ms. Hale has operated under a fraudulent document, a document we have now proven, through forensic analysis, to contain a forged signature of the deceased." She held up a copy of the original trust. "This is Elaine Rowan's real will, the one she left in a bank vault, the one that leaves her personal assets to her daughter, Cassidy." She then held up a copy of the forgery. "And this is the fake." The room exploded. Flashes from the local press cameras were blinding. Reporters were shouting, rushing the stage. "Ms. Hale, did you forge the document? How much money did you take? What about the tax fraud allegations?" Veronica was cornered, her eyes wide and animalistic. She grabbed the microphone, her voice a desperate, hysterical screech. "Lies! These are all lies! That girl is unstable. She's twisting everything. Those papers were a mess. They were, I should have just destroyed them all when I had the chance." She stopped. Her hand flew to her mouth. She had confessed, in a room full of reporters, on a hot mic. She had confessed to destroying, or wishing to destroy, legal documents. A new figure moved toward the stage. My father. Veronica's eyes lit up with desperate hope. "Thomas, tell them she's lying." My father looked pale, his hands shaking, but he did not look at his wife. He looked at me, at the table where I sat with Marla and Hector. He walked past Veronica, ignoring her outstretched hand, and took the microphone from Naomi. "My name is Thomas Rowan," he said, his voice shaking but clear. I have not been a good father. I have been a coward. I listened to the wrong person for a very long time." "Thomas," Veronica shrieked, a sound of pure betrayal. "The things you heard from my first wife, Elaine, tonight are the truth," he continued, his voice gaining strength. "Her assets were stolen. Her memory was edited. I will be cooperating fully with the court, and with my daughter, to make it right. I am deeply, deeply sorry. Cass." This was the final straw. Veronica's carefully constructed world had just been detonated by her own husband. As my father stepped off the stage, Veronica lunged. She didn't lunge at him, she lunged at me. She was coming for my table, her face a mask of pure, murderous rage, her nails out like claws. "You!" she screamed. "You did this! You bitch!" She was fast, but Marla, in a move of surprising agility, thrust her cane out, tripping her. Hector stood up, blocking her path. But she was still coming, scrambling past them. She raised her hand to slap me, just as she had on Christmas Eve. This time, I didn't flinch. I didn't move. A uniformed security guard, hired by the club, grabbed her arm mid-swing, stopping it inches from my face. "Ma'am, you need to come with me," the guard said, his voice firm. Veronica struggled, but he held her in an iron grip. She had just, on camera, in front of everyone, tried to physically assault me again. She had confirmed her violent, unstable nature for the entire world. Reporters were swarming, their cameras flashing, capturing her struggling against the guard. From the corner of the room, a man I recognized as a minor partner in Rowan Family Holdings was on his phone. "Sell it," I heard him hiss. "Sell my stake. Now. I'm out." I sat there, my heart hammering, but my hands steady on the table. Marla reached over and placed her frail, paper-skinned hand on mine. Hector stood behind my chair, a silent guardian. My father stood alone, by the stage, a broken man who had finally done the right thing. Naomi walked calmly back to our table, the chaos swirling around us as if we were in the eye of a hurricane. She sat down, took a sip of her water, and adjusted her cuff. She looked at Veronica, who was now being forcibly escorted from the ballroom, still screaming. Naomi leaned in, her voice a quiet, satisfied whisper against the din. "It's time to go to trial." The trial was not a media circus. Naomi had seen to that. It was a cold, precise, procedural dissection in the Washoe County District Court. The room was beige, the lighting was a dull fluorescent, and the air was heavy with the smell of old paper and stale coffee. Veronica sat across the room, next to a high-priced attorney who looked like he was regretting every life choice that had led him there. She was wearing a subdued navy suit, her hair pulled back. She was trying to look like a victim, but her eyes, which darted constantly between Naomi, the judge, and the jury, were those of a trapped animal. Naomi's case was a masterpiece of chronological evisceration. She didn't just present a narrative, she built an unassailable fortress of facts. The first witness was the forensic document examiner. He was a dry, meticulous man who spoke in monotones, but his testimony was a bomb. He placed the forged Second Amendment under a projector for the jury to see. "The signature of Elaine Rowan on this document," he stated, "is a simulation, a skilled one, but a forgery nonetheless. The pen pressure is inconsistent with her known fluid handwriting, the ink. The ink is the most conclusive part. Through gas chromatography, we determined this specific batch of black ballpoint ink was not commercially manufactured until 18 months after Ms. Rowan's death." A quiet gasp rippled through the jury. Veronica's attorney was frantically scribbling notes, but there was no cross-examining chemistry. The next witness was Mr. Davies, the manager from Sunrise Federal. He was nervous, but his testimony was simple. He confirmed the bank's records. He confirmed the lease for Box 1432 was signed 10 years ago by Elaine Rowan. He confirmed the only designated beneficiary, with sole right of access upon her death, was Cassidy Rowan. He confirmed I had presented the matching key. He confirmed my mother's intent. The third witness was the former accountant, the gray egg, no longer anonymous. He was a nervous man in his late 40s, but on the stand, he found his courage. Naomi didn't just have him read his ledgers. She had them blown up on a massive screen for the jury. "These are the IRS filings for Rowan Family Holdings, LLC," he said, pointing to one column. "It shows an initial capital investment of $700,000, received on January 15, 2010, before Ms. Rowan's death." He then pointed to the next screen. "And this is the wire transfer request from Ms. Rowan's investment account, the one obtained from the bank. It is dated March 8, 2010. 2 months after Ms. Rowan's death. It's the same amount, to the same shell company. They are the same funds. One document is a bank record, the other is a tax fraud." Naomi let that hang in the air. "And where did that $700,000 go, Mr. Harris?" "It was recategorized as management fees and operating expenses," he said, adjusting his glasses. "I have the itemized receipts. A $22,000 lease on a luxury SUV, $40,000 in country club dues, $180,000 in consulting fees paid directly to Veronica Hale. It was her personal piggy bank." Veronica was staring holes into the side of his head. He refused to look at her. The next piece of evidence was the text message, recovered from the phone of a former associate of Veronica's, the notary whose license had been suspended. In it, Veronica had written, after the wire transfer, "It's a little messy, but I have the proxy. We just need the girl's signature on the final estate waiver, and the whole thing becomes legalized. She's young. She won't even read it." I had never signed that waiver. I had been too sensitive and uncooperative. My grief, the thing she'd mocked me for, had inadvertently saved me. The final witness for the prosecution was my father. He walked to the stand, his suit hanging off him. He looked like he had aged 20 years. He did not look at Veronica. He looked only at me. He raised his hand and swore the oath. Naomi's questions were gentle, but precise. "Mr. Rowan, did you sign this document, authorizing the transfer of funds as executor of your wife's estate?" "Yes." "Did you read it?" "No." "Why not?" I trusted my wife. My current wife. She told me it was a formality, a procedural cleanup. I was weak. I didn't want to look at the paperwork. I just wanted it to be over." He then recounted the story of the blackmail, the old debt, the threats Veronica had made. He admitted, under oath, to calling Dee Marla and Hector's boss. He turned to the jury, his voice breaking. "I was a coward. I enabled a lie because I was afraid of the truth. I was afraid of being alone, and I was afraid of my own past. In trying to protect my reputation, I destroyed my family. I failed my first wife, and I failed my daughter." He looked at me. "I am sorry, Cassidy. I am so sorry." Veronica's attorney did not cross-examine him. He just sat there, his head in his hands. The defense's case was pathetic. Their only strategy was to paint me as vindictive. "Ms. Rowan," Veronica's lawyer said to me on the stand, "isn't it true you just want a payday? That you're a greedy, resentful daughter, angry that your mother didn't leave you more? That you're dragging this good family's name through the mud for a check?" I saw Naomi rise from her seat out of the corner of my eye. She didn't shout. She didn't object. She just smiled. A thin, lethal smile. "Counsel's desperation is noted," she said to the judge, who nodded slightly. When it was her turn for closing arguments, she walked to the center of the courtroom, directly in front of the jury. "Counsel for the defense would have you believe this case is about greed," she said, her voice quiet, forcing everyone to lean in. "And he is right. It is about the insatiable, blinding greed of a woman who saw a family's tragedy as a business opportunity. It is about the greed that led her to forge a dead woman's name, the greed that led her to steal a daughter's inheritance, the greed that led her to commit tax fraud, and the pride that made her confess to it on a hot microphone in a room full of reporters." She paused, letting the words land. "The defense claims my client is greedy, but my client is not the one who fears poverty. My client is the one who, on Christmas Eve, was brutally assaulted for holding a 10-year-old piece of paper. The defendant isn't afraid of my client being greedy. She's afraid of my client being heard. She is not afraid of poverty. She is afraid of the truth." The jury was out for 45 minutes. When they returned, the foreman stood, his face grim. "On the count of forgery and fraud, we find for the plaintiff. On the count of breach of fiduciary duty, we find for the plaintiff. On the count of defamation per se, we find for the plaintiff. On the count of obstruction of justice and witness tampering, we find for the plaintiff." It was a clean sweep. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, put on her glasses. "The findings of this jury are binding. The court hereby rules that the original will and testament and First Amendment of Elaine Rowan are the true and valid documents. All assets of the Elaine Rowan Trust, including the academic and investment funds, are the sole property of the plaintiff, Cassidy Rowan." She wasn't done. This court awards compensatory damages, plus interest, and additional punitive damages for the intentional malice and defamation, in the amount of $2.5 million. A permanent restraining order is hereby granted. Ms. Hale will not come within 500 yards of Miss Rowan, Miss Marla, or Mr. Flores. Veronica made a small, choking sound. "And furthermore," the judge said, her voice like steel, "the evidence of criminal forgery, conspiracy, and tax fraud presented in this civil court is so profound and deeply disturbing that I am, at this moment, referring this entire case file, including the forensic report and the defendant's own testimony, to the district attorney's office for immediate criminal investigation." Veronica collapsed into her chair. "All assets of Rowan Family Holdings, LLC, and all personal assets of Veronica Hale are hereby frozen, pending that investigation." It was over. I had won. As the courtroom dissolved into noise, the bailiff moving toward a catatonic Veronica, a quiet figure approached our table. It was Ms. Klein, the notary who had been with us at the bank. "Ms. Price? Ms. Rowan?" she said, holding a single, folded piece of paper. "I found this after you left the bank. It wasn't in the box itself. It was tucked inside the ribbon-bound cover of the original trust document. It must have slipped loose. It's not a legal document. It's just a note. But I cataloged it as Item 7. I wanted to make sure you received it." She handed me the note. It was my mother's stationery. I unfolded it. "My dearest Cass," it read, "I left you the tools to fight the war. This is a note to win the peace. Your father. He is a good man, but he is weak. He is afraid of ghosts. But the woman he is with, she is something else. She looks at my things, my life's work, my home, even you, as if it's all just furniture, things she can move around, paint over, or throw away when it doesn't match her new decor. I felt the tears, not of grief, but of release, well in my eyes. This is the most important thing. My love, do not ever let anyone, turn your memory into a piece of furniture. Your life and my memory are not decorations. They are the house. Live in it. I looked up, smiling through the tears. Aunt Marla was on one side of me, Hector on the other. I took both their hands. I looked across the emptying courtroom. My father was standing alone, near the witness box, a man without a future, but finally free of his past. He had been spared the asset freeze, his cooperation noted, but his life was in ruins. He saw me looking. He took a single, halting step toward me. He didn't make an excuse. He didn't ask for forgiveness. He just met my gaze, his own eyes clear for the first time in a decade. "Daughter," he said, his voice quiet, resolute. "I owe you more than a truth. I owe you a life." Thank you so much for listening to this story. Let me know in the comments where in the world you're tuning in from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Please subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories. Like this video, and if you want to see more stories like this one, show your support by hitting that hype button so this video can be heard by more people.